Okay, great. So welcome everyone to this special webinar today. Thank you for joining us. Our special topic series covers cooperative topics around governance, management, and leadership, which does certainly span quite a number of things. I'm Erin Hancock. I'm the Program Manager for Education with International Center for Cooperative Management at St. Mary's University in the Sobey School of Business. And we are located in Mi'kma'ki, the unceded, never surrendered, and ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people. If any of you would like to go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat, if you want to mention the lands that you're on, you're welcome to do that. Of course, we know this isn't where reconciliation ends, but rather we want to acknowledge it as part of our constant reminders to ourselves of the history of our land. And with our partners around the world, our center offers business education online and destination to elevate the cooperative economy, do research on cooperative governance and management, and we do symposia, webinars, study tours, working papers, and other activities to put ideas and tools in the hands of great people like yourselves around the world, of course. And so at managementstudies.coop, you'll see more in what we do. So today, you'll note that this is set up as a meeting place for you to see who else is here. So you can go ahead and change your name if you'd like, so other people can see who you are, where you're from. Feel free to add your pronouns, add your land acknowledgement, and if you want to add your website. And along the way, if things come up in the webinar where you want to add questions, comments, your own experiences, link to things, please do so. At the end of this, we'll share the recording. We'll also go ahead and send you the chat notes as well. So if anything rich comes up in there, you'll have that in your record. So this is the focus of our webinar today on Isthmus engineering. We thought that maybe we could call this webinar, "There are 40 people on your board. How does that work?" But some of you maybe have already poked into the case study and have seen that. So you may have an idea of what's to come. But we thought it was really important to showcase a really interesting example of cooperative governance on the worker co-op side of the world, and particularly interesting in just the fact that an engineering firm like this is set up as a worker cooperative, and then to see the layers of really interesting governance that's happening within the organization, we think you'll all find very interesting. So I will go ahead and put a PDF of this into the chat, and I'll link you to where our case studies live on our website as well. But this is based on a case study that was researched and written by Margaret Lund, and so you'll get a copy of that as well if you want to go deeper or reflect back on anything that's been raised today. And just to flag that this isn't the only case study that we've done. We have a whole series, working papers and case studies, particularly focusing in a lot of cases on cooperative governance in various areas of the economy, various ownership models. So that's available to you as well. And once I stop talking, I'll link some of these things in the chat as well. And for those of you who maybe are not familiar with the center or need a refresher on some of the things that we're up to, we're probably most known for our online master's program, Master in Management Co-ops and Credit Unions for working professionals and cooperatives and credit unions. We also offer a graduate diploma and certificate online as well. It is application season this year, so folks are welcome to apply and to nudge those people in your lives who you think might really get something out of that and be interested as well. Just to flag, we also do online executive education courses. We also do them in person sometimes too when COVID isn't an issue. So April 4th and 5th is our next one coming up. I'll remind you of these things at the end, and I'll drop some links as well into the chat. This one focuses particularly, I know it's a hot topic these days, cooperative identity, and really seeing how do you go from sort of looking at that through a strategic lens to what does that mean in practice through various aspects of management and governance. And then if we have some financial cooperative credit union folks here on the call, we do have the Canada DE program, a leadership program for credit union professionals coming up in Halifax in the springtime. So an incredible program, life-changing, and more details on that are on our website as well. We're accepting registrations now. So There you go. You're all up to date on everything. So let's jump into our focus today. So just to introduce our great speakers here. So we actually are going to kick off today with Margaret Lund. So she's the case study author and researcher. She's an independent consultant specializing in the areas of community development, finance, and shared ownership strategies. Throughout her 30-year career, Margaret has worked with enterprises in every major cooperative sector, including credit unions, consumer co-ops, housing co-ops, worker co-ops, healthcare, agriculture, and small business cooperatives. So basically, we can ask her anything. And prior to launching her consulting practice in 2008, she spent 16 years as a small business lender to cooperatives. So huge history there. And Ole Olsen, who's going to be the sort of primary speaker for today, the person who lives this experience with Isthmus Engineering, has worked for cooperatives for over 40 years, including the past 30 years as a member owner of Isthmus Engineering, a manufacturing cooperative. He's a graduate of the University of Wisconsin, Platteville, and a licensed professional electrical engineer. Ole has served several terms as a board member for the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops and is a founding member and current president of MadWork, Madison Worker Cooperatives. Ole encourages employee ownership and the democratic workplace model and does public speaking engagements for many organizations. So we know he's very busy. We're very lucky to have him here today. So we'll go ahead and kick it over to Margaret right now. Go ahead, Margaret's going to kick us off with some of the highlights that she sort of discovered throughout doing the case study research.
Yeah, so thank you. I was really happy to do this case study, to have this identified as one of the co-ops to work with, because I've known these guys a really long time. I've probably known them for almost my 30-year career, and for that whole 30 years, people have been saying, "You have 40 people on your board? How does that work?" And then they would laugh and they would say, "Well, we're engineers," and that was the short answer of how you do it, and which is something of an answer. But there's also a longer answer to that. And as I found in the case study, that longer answer is really interesting. And to me, as somebody who works with lots of different kinds of co-ops, there's always this kind of tension between can you be democratic, but can you also, be a larger organization, or, how do you get things done? And it always seems, at least to people outside the co-op community, that this is a zero-sum game, that growth and efficiency, that automatically means you're going to have less engagement and less participation. And I just think Isthmus is just a fabulous example of how that isn't true. I mean, we all know that isn't really true, but just how do you organize? But how do you literally organize, a larger group of people or around projects or whatever? And you do that in a way that's really democratic, and that's really true to the co-op member's idea of what a co-op is. So he'll talk about the 40-member board and how that works. But also, kind of related to that, was something that I was able to delve into more, is this idea of the board officers. And again, this is another unconventional wisdom. It takes a long time to be the board president, and then you should be in that position for a long time, and it's super powerful and important, and you make all these decisions. And they have a really interesting rotating way of officers. And in this particular case, it doesn't mean that the officership isn't taken seriously, the fact that it's handed, that different people hold it, but they just they have these officers function somewhat differently on their board than lots of organizations, which I think is also a really kind of specially tailored way of democracy working at Isthmus and making it work for them. So Ole will talk about that, and I know he has some slides on this, but another thing that's really striking, and I think real different, again, because they're an engineering co-op, they do a lot of stuff with formal project management. And again, they didn't invent project management. Is something that conventional businesses use all the time. They particularly use it in industries like engineering, or projects like Isthmus works on, that are where you're working on a unique machine. So it's not a assembly line, it's the opposite of that. That you need to be able to manage that project. And one thing Isthmus has done is taken these tools from a conventional business world, and they've made them like really tools of democracy and transparency. They've really made them their own. And I just find that so entrancing, that we're kind of using the tools of the man. And we're going to make, we're going to say, well, what, how do you use these kind of conventional business structures to make our co-op better and make ourselves a better co-op and make ourselves a co-op where people have more autonomy and have more decision making and have more information about their work. And I think they're a great example of that. And then a kind of related way, I know Oli will talk about, and they talk all the time, they give a huge amount of credit to the rest of the US worker co-op community and the things that they've learned at meetings about facilitation management, and then they turn around and teach their project management skills and their approach to other people. So they're a very nice example, I think, that when we really all get together, we are so much more than the sum of our parts. If we put all our brains together, we really get something very special. And so I just think they're a really nice example of that. So I'm not going to talk anymore. I'm going to let Oli talk, but I hope you'll all look at the case too, and some of the other cases, because there really are some extraordinary co-ops, I think, represented in this group that we've been researching. So I'm going to hand it over to Oli now, if that's all right.
All right. Well, good afternoon, good morning, everyone, depending on where you're at. I see we have people everywhere, so that's a great thing. I like starting these off with just kind of a strange story to get your attention, and hopefully you can see my screen now, and I'm sure Aaron and Margaret are looking at this going, Oli, where are you going with this? So this will only take a minute. So you've all probably heard of Apollo 13. It was meant to be the third mission on the moon. April 11th to the 17th, 1970, 42 years ago. James Lovell, John Swigert, and Fred Hayes were the astronauts. You probably also know that they had issues. Oxygen tank on the service module failed 2 days into the mission. The original mission was scrubbed. The crew swung around the moon to head back to Earth. And interestingly enough, it failed on April 13th, and it was Apollo 13. It was a Monday, not a Friday, though. If you know the story at all, you know that the ground crew actually had to find a way for them to scrub the carbon dioxide from the air that they were breathing so that they would have enough time to get back to Earth. Remember, this is 1970. Really no computers like we think of today, no GPS, no calculators. And you might know the story. You've probably seen the movie if you're my age or close to it. If you're enough of a NASA nerd, you might even know the astronauts. But one of the true unsung heroes of this story is a person by the name of Judith Love Cohen. She was an aerospace engineer, and she was responsible for the abort guidance system. While preparing for this mission, she was 9 months pregnant. They were having issues with her guidance system while trying to solve an important problem. She went into labor. She actually took the documents and plans to the hospital with her that day, and she called in the corrections before she gave birth that day. That was April 13th, 1970. Her system is called upon to take immediate control and get the astronauts back to Earth. So remember, 1970, they're doing all their math with slide rules, no calculators, no computer program to prepare for the oxygen tank blowing up. Imagine being an engineer at this time. All new flight paths, coordinates, speed, entry angle, landing coordinates, hundreds of variables, so much risk, and the world is watching. Nobody probably knows her name, but they would have if it were her system would have failed. Why don't we know her? We knew the story. You might know the astronauts even. We saw the movie. They gave some of the ground crew credit, but she's actually one of the heroes in the story. Just curious, who did she give birth to? Her son was Jack Black, born before the mission. We all probably know who that is, but we still don't know her. Why is that? So my moral to this story is way too often, those who do the work do not get the recognition or the reward. That's what makes worker co-ops different. So that's a true story. It's 2 minutes of your life you're not going to get back. But I think it's a good point of trying to recognize the people that are doing the work. So now for the real stuff, let's talk about a worker co-op. So as Aaron and Margaret said, it's Isthmus Engineering. We're a worker-owned cooperative in Madison, Wisconsin. We concept, design, and build custom automation equipment. We build machines. We've been in Madison since we started, and we'll be here forever, I hope. Established in 1980, so we're 42 years old. Started as a partnership and became an official worker cooperative January 1st, 1983. We currently have just over 80 employees. About half are engineers, and the other half are electricians and machinists and mechanics, administrative people. We do over $30 million in annual sales, and our name is hard to pronounce, but we're named after the isthmus between Lakes Monona and Mendota in Madison. So the picture on the bottom is where we started, actually. The different industries we serve are medical and pharmaceutical, consumer products, light industrial, automotive, and emerging markets such as solar. So we don't make these products, we build the machines that make these products. We're a project-based company. All the work that we do comes in as a project. We have our operations manager and a scheduling committee. They select individuals to work on each project. And then the project has a team of workers responsible for completing that task, for getting it built the way the customer wants it. This is a little bit of an older slide. It says average project life is 20 to 52 weeks. We're currently working on machines that'll take us about 3 years. Normally I show some machine videos because they're kind of interesting to watch and people enjoy seeing them, but that's not what we're here for today. So I'm going to point you to YouTube or to our website, which you'll see our website address at the end of this presentation. But if you go on YouTube and you search for Isthmus Engineering and Manufacturing, we probably have 100 videos of machines running. So I'll just point you that way. This happens to be a machine. This is a design model. They kind of look like a cartoon, but this is a machine that actually builds a mousetrap. Not kidding. This makes a medical capsule. I'm not supposed to tell you what it does, but I can tell you that the capsule that it makes is used to clean surgical tools for hospitals. This is a machine that makes a pacifier, which you give your infant. And this is a machine that makes the part of a solar panel. So anyways, those are the things we build. That's what our projects do, is build things like that. Let's talk a little bit about our structure here to get to the meat of this. We're a worker cooperative. We're modeled after the Mondragon cooperatives in Spain. Actually, if you have seen the Mondragon experiment, which is a grainy old BBC documentary that was produced in about 1980, our 4 founders watched that video, and that's what inspired them to become a worker co-op. It was an experiment at that time. They didn't know if they could make it work. And we still consider it an experiment to this day. So I know many other worker co-ops that have come out of the Mondragon experiment. So I highly recommend it if you haven't seen it. As Margaret was saying, over half of our employees are also member owners. And it always, regardless of how big we get, it always seems like we're just over the 50% mark as far as membership goes. We, due to attrition and retirement and bringing on new members, it just seems like we've always been around that 50% mark. All members, everybody that becomes a member, sits on the board of directors, and that's a little bit where we consider ourselves a direct democracy. That's currently over 40 people. I think it's 42 people right now. We just brought another person in recently, and we're on the verge of bringing another person in. So annually, we elect an executive committee, president, vice president, secretary, treasurer. So there's an annual election. It doesn't mean that we elect new people each year. Sometimes, we like to elect the treasurer, for consecutive years, because it takes almost a year to get them up to speed. So a treasurer might be in place for 2 or 3 years. Same with the president. That's another position that might go for more than 1 year, but there is an annual election for that position. The board makes all administrative decisions, not project decisions. They don't make any decisions about the machines we're building. The board decides who to hire, who to fire, when to build a new building, what color to paint the mailbox, but not anything regarding the machines that we build. We have a flat management structure. All the work that is non-project, that's not towards the machines, is mostly done by committees. The committees are something that are also restructured annually. After we vote for our executive officers, we have a sign out sheet and everybody volunteers for committees. And the board looks at the sign up sheet and they see how many people are on each committee. And then the board has the right to shuffle people around to make sure that there's enough people on each committee and the right people are on each committee. But this gives everybody a chance to be part of different sections of the business. Everybody starts as an employee for the first 2 years. After that time, they can apply for ownership. They have to buy their voting stock when they become a member. It takes an 80% vote to get voted in and 50% to get voted out. Our committee structure, everybody in the light green oval is an employee of Isthmus. If you become a member, that's the dark green oval in the middle. The committees that we have are made up, some of the committees can be both members and non-members. Some of the committees are members only if they have any confidential information that they're dealing with. So you can see one other thing that's unusual about us, our sales manager cannot be a member. That's something that we put into our bylaws. So although he has a lot of influence, or they have a lot of influence, they don't get a vote on the board. So we did a study. This is, we should probably redo this, but we did it in 2010 when we had about 50 people, and it's nice to use round numbers. So if we had 50 people and each person worked about 2,000 hours in that year, that would be 100,000 total work hours. If you look at the bottom of that chart, you can see that just as a gut check, in that year, we worked 97,000 hours. We track all our time, so we know how much time was put into all of these different things. So the amount of time that this big board that we have spent on board meetings was about 2,083 hours, which ironically, 52-week year, 40 hours a week is 2,080 hours. So almost exactly 1 man year was spent on the board labor. All the committees that we have, the work that was put into the committees, that was another almost 1 man year, 2,070 hours. So we don't have a lot of supervisors and managers and a lot of overhead governance. We're doing that all with the committees and with the board. So it turns out that our indirect labor, the labor that's not spent working on jobs, was about 31%, a little over 31%. And the time we spend actually working on jobs is just under 70%. We're electricians and machinists and engineers. We're not business people. I don't know if that's good or bad, but these are real numbers. This is 70% of our effort goes into producing something. 30% is meant managing ourselves. So if somebody always asks, what's this cost you to do? This is what it cost us. So democratic decision-making. First complaint usually stated is the length of time it takes to make a decision. I don't know if you've ever been part in a meeting like this. I've definitely been part of them, and I've definitely seen them. In many co-ops, especially worker co-ops, board meetings are painful. Too long, too inefficient, not enough engagement. Co-ops, especially new co-ops, rarely take the time to establish ground rules or for process or structure. We are no exception. 30 years ago, when I started at Isthmus, there were only 14 people on the board. We were in the exact situation where meetings were ridiculous. Our board meets twice a month. The meetings average 5 to 6 hours long. That's averaged. We had meetings longer than that. Topics at the end of the meetings were rushed. They didn't get the same attention as the agenda items that started the meeting. So previous meeting minutes were gone through line by line, even if no action had taken place. At that time, there were about 30 total people that worked here, and all of our customers were within 50 miles. It was a much simpler situation than what we have today. Now we have 80 people, over half our members. All members still sit on the board, and the full board still meets twice a month. So that hasn't changed. None of that's changed. We are a much more complicated company, a more technical workforce, and tons of external dynamics. COVID is just an example of that. Our board meetings now are usually about an hour long. We actually, last night we went an hour and 20 minutes, and people thought it was a long meeting. So we accomplished more than we ever have before in our meetings. And the board still has final say on almost all administrative decisions. So what changed us? They mentioned project management earlier, and that's definitely had a huge effect on how we approach things. Speaking to other worker co-ops that have the same issues, 40 years of our own experience, we kind of know what doesn't work, and we're still trying to find things that do work. And we attend a lot of co-op conferences. So when the US Federation has a good nuts and bolts conference, there's nothing better than sharing ideas with other worker co-ops that are at those conferences. So whether it's your regional organization or the national organization like the US Federation of Worker Co-ops or the NCBA, any nuts and bolts conferences that you can go to are just well worth your while as a co-op. So some of the things that we'll talk about here, I have to mention that they're not our ideas. These aren't original ideas. We've applied these techniques and tools that we've gotten from other people. We've made them work for us. And it wasn't one magic wand that fixed everything. It was a step-by-step process. I would say that started about 15 years ago. So I've been here 30 years. Our meetings were painful for the first half of my employment. Over the last 15 years now, we've finally refined them into something that new members that start don't understand what a bad meeting is. So we definitely take it for granted now. Let's talk about some of those things. Different duties. The president, I think this is similar to a lot of worker co-ops where the president is a facilitator, not a decision maker. So it's not necessarily a position of power. Does not make decisions. He makes sure that decisions get made. The duties include setting the agenda, determining meeting schedules, when the meetings can happen, and the president facilitates the board and executive committee meetings. The vice president, I've heard other people call him the needle. The vice president's responsible for going around poking people, making sure that they're carrying through what the board voted to do. So originally this position was just used as a filler position. If one of the other executive committee members wasn't there, the vice president could fill in for that person. In the blue box at the bottom, these are duties that we've added to the vice president over the years. So the vice president does the meeting roll call. He makes sure that we have meeting quorum. So he's chasing people, making sure they're going to be at the meeting. When there's 40 people, that's not necessarily a simple job. We have something we call the topics log, and we'll get into that a little bit further. But the vice president reviews the topics log, the agenda topics log, and he looks to see what the board voted on. And then he goes around and makes sure that all that stuff is getting worked on, and if there's any updates for the board. So he also tracks all the committee work. So we mentioned the board topics log, the agenda topics log. It's basically a 2-page spreadsheet. There's an active sheet and a completed sheet. We kind of start a new one every year. So pretty simple. I don't even have to give you an example of this. You can create a 2-page spreadsheet on your own, but all new agenda items go into the active log. And only things that are being worked on come to the board. So on the active sheet is any new agenda item and any old agenda item that's being worked on. So that's what we talk at the board level, is what's on the active sheet. As things get completed, as the board thing sees items get completed, they get moved into the completed list. So at the end of the year, on the completed list are all the things that you've accomplished in your board meeting, all the different projects And at the end of the year, you still have the active sheet, whatever's still going on gets moved into the next year. And you have a complete list from the previous year of what got completed. One of the things that came from project management training was the process of charters. So whenever a new idea comes to the board and the board says, hey, that sounds like a great project, we should take that on. Let's put an ad hoc committee together. They'll say the first thing you have to do is create a project charter. So the project charter defines the scope of the work, stake, who's involved, the schedule for things getting completed, and what's your definition of complete? What is a successful project? So I can kind of show you, we kind of use this for our committees also. This is an example of it's an older committee, but our co-op affairs committee, this is how we started out doing it. So this is an old one with purpose, history, definition, guiding principles, and some reference sources. What I want to point out here is it's a one page. If it's any more complicated than one page, it's too much information. This is our current list, which I think Aaron is going to share a generic one and an example on the chat list. But so this is an example of a project charter. We started Energy and Resource Committee. Defined who the chair people were, who the team members were. We defined a problem statement, a project description. You don't have to read all this stuff because you're going to be getting it in the chat, but basically I'm highlighting the blue lines here. Who the stakeholders are, project scope statement that has objectives, deliverables, scope, milestones, and the critical success factors. And there's a brief description of what each one of these are. If it takes your team more than one meeting to fill this out, and it takes more than one page, you've put too much work into it. But this is something that's been invaluable to us because the committees, for the most part, are not empowered to make decisions, but the committees should have a predefined scope of work, and they'll use that scope of work to make a recommendation to the board and present the information that they've been working on. And then the board will make the decision. So this project charter like this helps you refine what the committees are going to be working on. So the scope doesn't creep outside of what the board is expecting. We would like every day to look like this. This is a real picture. I actually took this. But a lot of days look like this. You got to work through them. Spring will come. So that's my concluding slide. Here's our website. You can get to some of our machine videos at this website. My email address is on the bottom. Feel free to take a picture of this. I'm willing to open this up to questions.
Thanks so much, Ole. People are very appreciative of you and the things that you're sharing here today. Big time. I'm going to add Margaret to the spotlight as well. So we did have a couple of questions that came up. In particular, can you say a bit more about why it is that you, sorry, just let me grab that. The rationale around the sales manager not being a member or having a vote.
So we had it might have been a knee-jerk reaction. It's an interesting story that I won't share all of, but at one point we had, when we were much smaller, we had one position that was the general manager and sales manager that were kind of a combined position. And we found that one position held too much information. And we had a bad experience with it, and we decided to change it. And so we currently don't have a general manager. That's something we're experimenting with right now. We have the sales manager yet. We have no general manager. We do have an internal and operations manager, but we don't let the general manager or the sales manager be members just because they have so much influence. So that's why we did it that way. I don't know that it's something that'll stay that way permanently, but that's the way it is now. It's a good question, and that one always comes up.
Thanks so much. Someone had asked for the slides and I added them to the chat as well, if you want to go back and refer to anything that Ole had raised.
You know,
Okay,
Erin, I was just going to say, I was just thinking one of, and I think Jeff's even on this, but I did interview Jeff Yarwood, who's operations manager. And one of the things that struck me is I think he really is viewed much more like a trusted facilitator. So it's not really like a boss, but like someone, you know, who has a lot of information and coordinates things and, you know, has a point of view where he can see lots of different projects at the same time. But it's really a different perspective, I think, of that position than a really traditional general manager would have. And I'll stop.
thank you. Okay, question here from Evan. Is project management training offered to all employees, members, or a prerequisite for committee board and board work?
It's not a prerequisite. We had several of the people volunteered initially to do it that were already managing big projects. And what drove us into project management to start with was our projects were getting so big. The first time we built a machine that cost $1 million, we're like, how do we handle $1 million machine? How do we manage this project? So that's what forced us into it. But then once it was initially engineers that took the project management classes. Once they took it, they said, hey, you know what? We can use this for our governance. We can use this for how we actually operate the business too. So stuff that they were learning, things that they were learning through their training, we started to use. And now they do, rather than sending people to school, which we still do if they want to, we can do a lot of the project management training in-house now because we have people that are licensed project managers. So it was an investment, probably one of the best investments we ever made 15 or 20 years ago, was starting to send people into school. So.
Thank you, Ole. So because, you having the values that you do, and, it seems like really being open to the people who are involved, if they want to pursue membership in the cooperative, that's very much open to them. How is it that at that outset, knowing that at some point they could, move into the realm of membership, how do you find a culture fit? How do you know that person is right for the experience when obviously you're not hiring them from another engineering cooperative that follows a Mondragon type model? There's not a lot of those out there that you're sort of just passing people between. So how do you know that someone is right and might eventually be a good member?
That's a good question. I wouldn't say that engineers and machinists and electricians aren't necessarily the most knowledgeable about cooperatives coming off the street. They might be a member of a credit union or shop at Willie Street Co-op, but they probably really don't even realize it's a cooperative until they come here. And in fact, we have to compete with other companies. So we have to offer similar salaries and benefits to get them in the door. And then it's a matter of finding out if that person is somebody that you want to go into business with. It's not always easy. People are not guaranteed if they apply for membership that they'll get in the first time. Some people might have to apply a couple of times before they get in. It's really rare. In fact, it's only happened once or twice in my 30 years that somebody never got in. But it's a matter of finding out how they'll fit into the culture, and we try and do that in interviews. That's really difficult to do because you need to work with somebody for a while to find out how they're going to fit in. It isn't for 100% of the people. Some people need to be managed. It's hard to. Some people don't want the responsibility of being a business owner. So it's worked out for who we have as members now, and I hope that answered your question.
That's good. Yeah, we're going to toss a whole bunch of good ones at you today. So hope you had your coffee. Lots of great questions coming up in the chat. So how about this one? How do you maintain such high member engagement? And are there members who are resistant to the indirect labor and prefer to only do direct labor? And how do you address that?
Well, that's a great question. we still struggle with member engagement. But having the committee structure that we've got, everybody gets a chance to participate and take on and learn different avenues. It's kind of amazing. I mentioned not every member gets in the first time. We had a member that was a machinist that didn't get in the first time he applied. And we consider ourselves an engineering and manufacturing company. But normally everybody they don't think of Isthmus manufacturing, they think of Isthmus engineering. Anyway, so he didn't get in the first time. Eventually he did get in. He was elected president a few years later, and he's one of the best presidents we've ever had. And who would have thought that a machinist with his background would make a good president? You just don't know until you give people, let them take the responsibility that they, that you entrust them with and see where they go with it. So not everybody is 100% active on the board. Actually, if you had everybody that was 100% engaged all the time, your board meetings would look like the one where the people were holding each other's neck. Might not be a good situation. Sometimes you have to trust other people to carry out the work and do it, and then you still get a vote on it, before final action is taken. But it's I think the committee, the simplest answer to your question is we can spread the responsibility, we can spread the work out by the committee structure that we have. Gives everybody a chance to participate, and everybody can understand where and why the decisions are getting made. So.
That's great. Thank you. And that was a good question. That was from someone from the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops. So yeah, they're going to dig in to the good stuff. So maybe we'll open a space to get some other voices into the room. Jerome always asks great questions. Maybe it's better, Jerome, if you want to voice your question yourself, and then maybe I'll put Christina on deck and then Marcelo after that. So go ahead, Jerome.
Can you hear me? Yes,
Yes,
thank you
go
for that
ahead.
very interesting talk. Not just interesting, but also very informative, and I'm sure for many practitioners also just useful for their own firms, enterprises, and so on. So the question I had relates to this notion that you just said, Ole, of restricting membership from, you said, for instance, the sales manager, because these people have so much power and so on. Is there sort of an implicit danger of, I put it this way, of creating what the economists, I have an economics background, of creating sort of a principal agent framework where you have these, management on one side of the table and, workers on the other. How do you deal with that? Is that something that you've seen? Just, people think in terms of roles. You think of the Milgram's prison experiments in Stanford. People just, we love to play roles. We're sort of theatrical. So how do you deal with that?
Well, I definitely, we try to not have the difference between management and the workers. Actually, it breaks down, it's interesting. Most of the engineers sit in a quiet area where their computers are, and the shop floor tends to be, it's more wide open, and there's lots of noise, lots of background noise. But if you talk to the shop people and the engineers, I would say that's the breakdown between our management and workers, which we try to not let that come between. So even the fact that we don't let the sales manager become a member, it's not like we're trying to draw a line or anything. We're trying to have a check and balance. So on a normal work day, I kind of either report to the sales manager or the operations manager. But twice a month at a board meeting, the sales manager reports to the board. So it's a check and balance. It's so that one person doesn't hold all the power. We want to make decisions democratically. We don't want one person to be making all the decisions for us.
Thanks, Ole.
Erin,
Thanks, Jerome.
I just to
Please.
just bring up another thing from the case study and that topic. is with this orientation towards project management. I mean, not everybody is a project manager, and not everybody wants to be a project manager. Not everybody's skills are the right, including engineers who come in later in the process, they wouldn't be a project manager. So one of the things I think that also just kind of tamps down some of those natural tensions is the fact that like in a conventional business way, like the way you get ahead is to be a manager, and you be a project manager, then you be a department manager, then you know, there's like this hierarchical system, and it just isn't the only way to leadership, you know, at Isthmus. I mean, on either on the ground level or on the governance level. So I think that the fact that there just exists these different avenues, and that being a project manager doesn't necessarily mean, you know, that you have X, Y, and Z other powers or other money or other influence or any of these other things. It just kind of tends to make it, just tamp down some of those tensions a little bit. And I don't speak from being inside. I'm just saying, you know, from outside, that's a really different way of organizing work. So somebody ambitious could say, well, I'm not going to be a project manager, but I really want to be the chair of this committee or something else, you know. So you have different ways of you know, having, if you want to have influence, of doing that.
Thank you, Margaret.
Did that answer your question, Jerome? I want to make sure.
Well, I mean, I don't think there's any way to definitively answer something like that, because you're getting into topics like, you know, human nature and, you know, how to, you know, organize for all sorts of contingencies. But yeah, I just thought it would be an interesting a topic that probably you've had a lot of just experience with, just because that's, you know, you have to balance various interests in a company, especially the fact that you have to continue to exist, you know, you have to make sales. So yeah, but yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Jerome. Okay, great. We've got a number of other people. So over to Christina. Did you want to ask your question?
Sure, thank you. So my question was just around how do you prevent corporate mindset from creeping into the board or the membership ideals, and has this been an issue in the past?
Well, the only people that we allow on the board, first of all, are people that work here. If you don't work here, you can't be on the board. So that's one thing. The other, we don't have a lot of administrators on our board that have. So, I mean, our board is made up of electricians, machinists, and I can't say that there haven't been corporate ideas that have been discussed. And it's always a struggle. We have to make sure that we put the company first, and we're not trying to put ourselves first. You know, if the company is successful, everybody will be successful. So we kind of have to keep that in the back of our minds also. It's really common for us to look at the 7 cooperative principles, and, you know, somebody says, ask the board, well, I'd like to go to project management school. And we look at principle, what is it, number 4 or for number 5, that's education. Well, yeah, we should do that. We should offer this person the ability to improve themselves through project management. So we have the 7 cooperative principles probably published on our walls in probably 5 or 6 different spots. And I wouldn't say that we refer to them at every board meeting, but it's pretty common that we'll look at them and make decisions based on those principles. So for us, they're real.
Thank you, Christina. Thanks, Sobey. Okay, Marcelo, with the next question. Go ahead.
Hi, all. Hi, Margaret. Nice to meet you. A great presentation. I'm curious on the daily basis, as just like how you communicate between meetings. I see you like 60, 30, like a 30 will be like the indirect work, and the 60 will be like a direct work. But I'm curious about like how you communicate. Like, you only use email, you have like a different tools to decision maker, or like I saw a very good like a chart from each project, but I'm curious, like in the daily basis, like you only use email, you use other tools to communicate with each other, because it is a flat structure not
Yeah.
top down, then it's like you have like 40, like have a lot of people have to make decisions. So I'm curious about that.
Boy, I'll try and make this answer short, but that I can give you a long explanation for this. We try and do as much face-to-face as we can. Obviously, COVID disrupted us just like it did everybody else, and we had to go virtual, and we started to use Microsoft Teams, which was kind of our communication tool. But actually today is our first day without masks. So yay. So we're back to face-to-face. Through our project management training, usually, like, let's say we're building a machine. The entire group, the entire team meets every morning for what we call a scrum. And it's just meant to be a 15-minute stand-up meeting. The project manager says, what's everybody doing? What are you working on today? What did you do yesterday? Okay, let's get it done. And if the project manager needs to redirect a couple people, that's his chance to do that. And then the project manager usually spends at least one meeting a week talking with the customer. And so that'll be usually a virtual meeting, because our customers now are from coast to coast, sometimes international. So that's how the customer kind of tracks us. And then, so the project manager is kind of the bridge between the customer and the project team. And a lot of our customers now are starting to use Microsoft Team, which has its ups and downs. I'm not a big Microsoft fan, but that's what industry is using right now. So there's several other platforms that allow you to do the same thing. So there is usually, the project managers are really good about keeping track of emails and history. We do have marker boards that some teams will use quite extensively that are right next to the machines. So if you're looking for something to do, or if you're having problems with something, you can go on the marker board, and then the project manager can decide how to divvy it up. Or if you see something that you can fix, you can take care of it. And that's also how the administrators can get involved. If the operations manager sees a marker board that's over full, he can say, hey, do you guys need more help? And it's a way for everybody to track everything. So, and then last but not least, we have something we call Wednesday lunch, which I don't know that you talked about it at all, Margaret, but every Wednesday, everybody in the company sits down for lunch together, and Isthmus pays for the lunch, and we talk about all the machines that are on the floor. So every team has to talk about their machine and where it's at. Are they on schedule? Are they behind? Do they need help? Are they starting to wind up? Do they have customers coming in? So once a week, the entire company finds out where everybody else is and who needs help. And that's just for the project labor. That's not for administrative decisions. The board takes up the administrative decisions during the board meetings. So that's for all the work being done. So kind of a long-winded explanation, but to give you an idea, that's how we communicate.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thanks, Marcelo and Oli. Oh my goodness, there's so many good questions. This could go on another hour, but I want to respect people's time. So Paola, are you there?
Yes, hi. Thank you so much. It's been just wonderful so far. My question seems a little bit tied to Marcelo's question, but how do you make sure everyone's informed enough on all aspects of the business to vote in a meaningful way? Is that even a concern? Do you have commitments that each voting member has to review certain information before they vote? How do you work with that, in addition to the communication you described?
Yeah. So all financial information, all agenda items, the topics log, all that information is open to all the membership. Everybody has all that information. Before each board meeting, the president sends out the new agenda, a link to the topics log, and for open and closed meetings. So everybody is supposed to review those items before the board meetings. If they don't do that, that would revert us back into our 5 and 6 hour meetings, having to review everything from the top down. So that's a very good question. And it's one of the things that topics log gives everybody a chance to see where things are at. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Okay, so I will say that we will spend the last couple of minutes trying to get in a couple more questions. So, but I will say if people do need to leave at the hour, I will say thank you to everyone for being here. Thank you so much to our speakers. Thank you, Oli. We know that you get a million requests, and so thank you for coming and sharing with this audience. We will add this to YouTube, and we will send the recordings and the attachments and so forth to other people after as well. So
feel free to use my email address also. I might not get back to you same day, but when I do get time, I'll answer your questions if you want.
Thanks, Oli. Okay, we'll include that in the follow-up email as well. So if people do need to depart, see you later. Maybe we'll stay on an extra few minutes to see if we can address a couple more questions. Sunil, did you want to unmute yourself and ask a question? Okay, maybe.
My question is that when we are forming various committees, is there a possibility that one member can be on more than one committee?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's going to depend on the size of your organization. You know, if you're a small organization, you might have to be on 3 or 4 committees. I think I'm on 3 committees right now, but a couple of the committees aren't very demanding. So we, especially when people are new, we recommend that they don't take on more than 1, maybe 2 committees at a time. And so the board looks at that. When the board reviews the sign-up sheet for all the committees, the board says, you know what, you're on 4 committees here. You need to pare that down a little bit so that you're not overburdened. So that is something the board watches. But it is possible to be on more than 1 committee.
Thank you, Sunil. Thanks, Oli. Okay, one more question, and I got an upvote. So it's a real democratic situation here. So this one's from Electra, asking, I'm wondering how has your board member orientation changed over time? What elements have you introduced that have made a difference in how members understand governance and collaborate within the governance structures?
Wow, these are good questions. So initially, we do very little training, which is one of our weaknesses for new members. It's learn by doing. And initially, employees could not be on committees. So they never get to experience facilitating, making decisions democratically until they became a member. So that was something that changed probably 20 years ago, where we had certain committees that we started to let new employees be on if they wanted to. And that also gave the board a chance to see what people were capable of. So it's worked out well for us. And we've expanded the number of committees that can have both members and non-members on. But that's how they learn right now. It's one of our weak points, I think, is how we get people trained. But
thank you, Oli and Margaret. Well, that brings us to the hour. There's still some activity in the chat if people want to address any of those questions or chat back and forth, but we'll make sure to send people lots of the good bits in the follow-up email, and we'll link some of those in YouTube as well in the description. So thank you to you both, and thank you to everyone who's here and everybody with all the great questions too. We hope that you take a lot from this. Even if you take a little, you'll be doing well. And again, to dig a little bit deeper and revisit some of these things, we invite you to check out the full case study. So thank you, everyone. Happy cooperating. And you can visit managementstudies.coop if you want to see more of the things that we're doing at our center, the publications, the events, the degree programs, and other things. So thank you all. I'll hang out for a few minutes. We'll turn off the recording if people want to stay for a little informal chat for a couple minutes.